The hardest part of putting up a shed is always installing a base. So today I'm going to show you the easiest, quickest way of putting in a base that you can sit your standard garden shed on. Although you might still need to do a little bit of digging. So you want to put up a shed or a bike store or a tool store, and you need something for it to sit on, which I guarantee you is the hardest part of the project and the least fun as well. So today I'm going to show you something quick and easy for lightweight structures using a plastic grid like this. Now when I say lightweight structures, I'm talking about standard garden sheds and tool stores. If you've got something specific like a workshop or something expensive like a garden room, then I would highly recommend just putting down a concrete pad. If you invest in all that money, you might as well do the job properly. But if you're looking at a standard garden shed, then to use a lightweight plastic structure like this can be a really simple, cheap, quick and affordable way of putting your shed on it, and it should last for a long time as well. Unfortunately, as I said at the start, there's no way of getting around doing a bit of excavation. So before you put this in, I'm afraid we've got to do some digging. Unfortunately, taking out grass or topsoil on the surface is a must for any base. However, how much you take out really depends on how strong you need the base to be. For instance, if I was putting in a gravel drive for cars to my house using these plastic grids, which you can do by the way, you would need at least 150 millimeters or 6 inches of type 1 under the grid, making the excavation around about 8 inches or just over. But for lightweight structures like paths and shed bases, really you don't need a thick base under the grid other than a screed layer just to flatten the surface to make the grid nice and flat, making the depth of the dig only around 60 to 80 millimeters. Obviously this cuts down hugely on the amount of material excavated. And a little tip here, if you're ever going to dig out material, think about where it's going to go before you start digging. If you just chuck it in the corner of the garden and leave it, all you'll end up with is a weed covered mountain in months to come. So if you can use it for something else and not have to double handle it, that means putting it somewhere and then digging it up at some future time, then that is the best way. Here I'm taking the opportunity to fill in a little bit of a valley I've got here in the paddock just to flatten the area out and to lose this material. While I'm digging, I'm aware that I've got an electricity cable probably going through the dig somewhere that's feeding the workshop that you can see here coming out the ground on the right hand side, which I finally find around about 100 millimeters or 4 inches down, which was installed when the house was built by the professionals in a shallow trench with no warning tape. Well done guys. So moving on to the important bit, this is what turned up from Amazon. This is 5 square meters of grid and heavy duty fabric that cost me £50, so it's around £10 per square metre, which is a lot cheaper than you will see in your DIY shop. I'll put an Amazon link to this in the description below, but there's lots of different versions and I've just picked one out of the many. So let me explain quickly why this grid adds so much capacity to the gravel to be able to take load. You see, if we look at something like concrete, then concrete is what we call a bound material. It's solid. The cement has actually bound all the aggregate together. So if we put a load on the top, it doesn't go anywhere because the cement stops it bursting outwards. Whereas if we look at gravel, which is unbound, if we put a load on the top, well, it just sort of sinks in. And you'll see as the load is being pushed down, gravel is going outwards. That's because there's nothing to restrain it. Unless we put a grid in, and then if we put a grid on, the results are totally different. So we've got the same pile of gravel. This time, if I try to put a load on the top, that is proving to be difficult to say the least. Because this time, what we've got is our grid. So that's holding it together. It's giving that tension to be able to hold the thing together to stop it going out. So just a little bit of grid, and it doesn't even have to be up to the top level to make a huge difference. compared to completely unbound. And that's why it works. To set the level of the excavation, the screed, and therefore the top of the grid, I use some timber stakes and mark 40mm down, which is the same thickness as the plastic grids, and then put on some insulation tape, which will be the thickness of my screed. So the bottom of this tape is the top of my excavation level. I just set one of these stakes next to the workshop at the level that I want the top of this base to be, and then transfer this to 5 more around the perimeter. I think it's really important to put a screed down for these grids to sit on, because the top of them is only going to be as flat as what they're sitting on. So I think it's worth spending a little bit of time preparing a screed. The last thing I do before covering up the earth is to compact the surface. Now normally I would use a whacker plate to do this, but this base is so small, it's quicker and easier to use a hand tamper. One little complication is I do have this foundation of this fence post which is sticking out and will clash with the base and with what I'm going to be putting on top of it. So I trim it down 2 or 3 inches just to get it out of the way, trying not to affect the post too much. The heavy-duty fabric that comes with the grids needs to go immediately underneath the plastic grid. However, it's also good practice to use the same type of material between the earth and any Type 1 or screed you're going to be putting on, which helps to separate the different materials and give it strength. Although I'm aiming to put in just 20mm of screed, because the stone tends to punch into the soft earth a bit when you compact it, it will eventually, inevitably end up a little bit thicker. So I'll firstly spread some Type 1 over the whole area. And here's another little tip for you. Properly compacting material like this does need some moisture in it. So if you have bone dry Type 1 like this, give it a watering down and it will compact a lot better than when totally dry. I compact it in the same way as I did the earth below it, and then cover it with sand that I can screed. Some of you may notice that this is actually building sand or soft sand, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I'm only using it because I've got it kicking about and it's sort of past its sell-by date. And when I say past its sell-by date, obviously sand doesn't go off. What I do mean is the plastic bags that it's in are starting to deteriorate in the sun and just fall apart. So now's the time to use it up and get it out of the way. I would suggest using sharp sand for this, always for screeds, but I think in this instance, on a light base like this, I'll get away with it. I screed the sand in exactly the same way that I would if I was laying some block paving. I'm just using a couple of thin bits of timber here, just put into the right level, which means I can use another piece of timber to screed and a trowel just to finish off the area. To be honest with you, it probably doesn't need to be this accurate because you can top it off with gravel at the top, taking out any lumps and bumps. However, I quite enjoy doing this type of screeding. So once I start, I just want to get it as accurate as I can. With the heavy duty fabric on, I can finally think about putting in these plastic grids. And they cut really easily. Although I'm using a handsaw here, they also cut really well using a circular saw or a jigsaw. And because I don't want to disturb the screed I've just put down, I found fixing a few of them on the grass together makes it easy just to plonk them in place and then clip them together with a rubber mallet. And this is the easy bit. To put down these screeds is just a 5-minute job. At this stage, there's a tendency for the whole grid, all connected together, to be able to move. So before I put any gravel in, I just weight it down with some of the bags, just so it's not got that tendency to slip out of position. And once I'm happy it's in its permanent position, I can fill all the grids with gravel. Here I'm using 10mm gravel, and it's important that you use small gravel to fill these grids and that it's angular, it's crushed, because crushed gravel compacts together a lot more and has a lot more strength than polished round stones. If you think about trying to compact marbles, it's almost impossible. So for these grids, you really need to use irregular crushed aggregate. And it's quite satisfying spreading it out and filling all these grids up to the surface level. And here I'm using a landscaping rake to do that with. With the grids filled, I did take the opportunity off camera just to put a batten all the way around the perimeter, a couple of millimeters higher than the grid. This is because the gravel should totally cover the grid, so you end up seeing no plastic at all. However, the instructions do tell you that this gravel is going to settle in time. So to accelerate that process, I'm using an electric vibrator here screwed to a piece of timber, just to shake all the gravel grids and compact it the best I can. Which worked out really well, and it's amazing how much this aggregate settles into the grid. As you can see here in a before and after of this area. So with the gravel all settled in, I take the opportunity to put another couple of bags over the top so you can't see the grid and the job is 100% complete. So there you go, an easy, cheap and relatively quick shed base, which I'm actually not going to put a shed on, but to see what I do put on this, which is more exciting than a shed, you're going to have to wait a week or two. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you next time.